This video is going to be a breakdown about how I implemented audio into the Unreal Engine 5 first-person shooter arena level. In the project, I'm using Wwise as my audio middleware to set up the logic for how my sounds are going to play back in the game, and then I'm using Unreal Engine 5's blueprint system to hook things up to different parts of the level. I chose to work on this project because I like first-person shooters and I wanted to build out some of the systems that I've seen in other games. To start, I'm going to break down how I did the weapons. In this level, the player character can use 3 different weapons: the grenade launcher, the rifle, and the pistol. To create the firing sounds for each of the weapons, I used a layered system that consists of a couple staples: a transient, a body, a mech, tail, and sublayer, and some sort of character layer to kind of help detail the weapon. Obviously, in a first-person shooter, firing the weapon is going to be the most repetitive part of this type of game. So to create variation, I utilized Wise's random containers to adjust the pitch and the playback of each sound. Each of my random containers were then placed into a blend container, which allowed me to play back the sound and mix my assets. To simulate weapons being fired, this project uses a projectile-based system, which means when the weapon is fired, a physical object is going to come out of the weapon and travel across the game world. In contrast to how I did the weapon firing sounds, I wanted to use RTPC values to affect variation over time for each of the hits. To simulate the distance of an object, I affected the volume and I added low-pass filtering to take out some of the higher frequencies as an object gets further away. Since I established the logic for how my weapons would play back in Wwise, I went to Unreal and I started to hook my sounds up using blueprints and animation notifiers. These notifiers allowed me to place event calls where the sound could be played from Wwise every time that the animation notifier was triggered. To implement the sound of the weapon's projectile coming into contact with the surface, I implemented post-event at location nodes into key areas. For the grenade launcher hit sound effect, I placed the node directly after event begin play, so as soon as the grenade comes into contact with the surface and it explodes, this plays before the visual effect. For the bullet projectile that's shared between the pistol and the rifle, I did the same thing, but I made sure to put it before a wiggle animation that's associated with the bullet, because if not, it stopped the animation. To keep the distance attenuation for each object, I had to make sure I grabbed the location to say where the actor would end up in the level. Now that my weapon system was set up, I moved over to the environments to give the weapons context. To start building out the level, I set up AK acoustic volumes that housed room tones and outdoor ambiences. Some of the areas on the map I didn't feel required a room tone or some sort of outdoor ambience, so what I did was I added AK reverb volumes in order to give some of these little rooms like a sense of space. Between the different acoustic audio volumes and reverb volumes, I needed a way to transition between each space, so I set up acoustic portals to help with this. Another part of this level that I thought would be fun to kind of help add character was giving these little jump pads that you see all around, like an emitter effect. I wanted to kind of replicate what I'd seen in games like Doom or Quake. With this level, the character could be anywhere. So what I decided to do is use a physical material-based footstep system, which would have a line trace sent down through the center of the character to detect which surface type I was on. This level contains 2 different surface types, one for metal and the other one for concrete. In order to change between the 2 surface types, I had to set up switch containers inside of Wwise. Within the switch, I have 2 random containers that are used for both of the materials. Inside of Unreal, different animation sequences are used for the character's movement. To avoid any overlap or phasing issues that would occur, I had to make sure that I adjusted the pitch and the playback limit inside of Wwise so that no more than 2 sounds would play at any given time. Inside the level, there's a couple different objects that the player character can mess with. The first one that I did was the jump pad sound effect. Inside of the blueprint for the jump pad, what I did was I attached the post event after the begin actor overlap has been hit. This means once the character has come into contact with the jump pad, and is launched into the air, the sound will shortly play after. Another interactive object inside the level was a sliding door. So what I did for this was I set up a box trigger that would trigger at the same time the door would open. And then inside of the open level blueprint, I set up an on actor begin overlap for the box trigger. So when the character would step into the range of the box, it would open. And then an on actor end overlap for the box trigger once the player has stepped out of the door. Similar to these other two interactive objects, I created a weapon pickup sound that also uses an on begin overlap. And then finally for the interactive objects was this target dummy that instead of using a begin overlap event, it's using an on hit component. Once the on hit component has been triggered, I'm going into a delay to limit the playback. And then the hit component is used to find the values that are going to drive my RTPC curve. So for this part of the video, I created a fresh project for the first person shooter level. And the thing about the game when you open it up is that all three of these weapons are referencing the same animation montage. And I had to find a way to separate all three so that way I could have individual firing sounds for each of the weapons. To speed up this part of the video, I've already integrated my sounds into Unreal from Wwise. These aren't the same sounds that I used in my level, but this is just for the sake of demonstration. The first weapon to get separated from the three that I had was the pistol. And what I did was I went into the pistol firing animation sequence and I made sure that the event was referencing the event that I had in Wise for the pistol firing sound. Once the animation sequence for the pistol firing was referencing the correct event from Wise, I went into the blueprint for the pistol and I had it reference the correct montage associated with the pistol firing. In order to separate the grenade launcher, I started by creating a folder, and then from there, I was going to create a new animation montage and sequence specifically for the grenade launcher. Inside of the project, the grenade launcher and the rifle both reference similar animations, so all I had to do was take the animations that were already established for the rifle and duplicate them, and then rename them for the grenade launcher. The important thing that I took away from this was that animation sequences are going to be referenced inside of the montage. So when a montage is triggered and you're firing the weapon, it's going to pull from the event that's hooked up to the animation sequence. But if you want this new montage to play the correct sound, you still have to make sure that your sequence is referencing the correct event. So in this case, it's the grenade launcher fire. Now all three weapons are independent of each other and can each have their own firing sound. So that's it for the video. This is how I went about implementing audio into the level. If anybody has questions, feel free to ask in the comments. But other than that, thank you for watching.